Morning. I'm Irene Pasternak. Today is day 3 of the series of strategies for sitting at Bellevue College. Welcome, everybody. And I'd love to hear where in today's focus is on backs and what part of your back bugs you when you're working or after you're working.
My tailbone.
Tailbone, okay.
Lower back? No. Same
Yeah,
here.
lower back.
Mine is also kind of like maybe kind of like the middle back, kind of like where the broad lie. Maybe I slouch too much or something at the end of the day, so that's why
That's the classic spot when you're sitting in a rounded seat.
Okay.
So solving that problem is going to be the biggest thing for helping. And today we'll work and get you more comfortable there. But to keep yourself more comfortable, doing that little adjustment will really help too.
Is it a thing as you get older that sitting in a nice armchair is not really as comfortable anymore? I've noticed that as I get older, I'm better on a chair, flat chair, than in a nice comfy chair.
I think we get more sensitive as we get older. And you can use muscles to keep yourself upright when you're in other kinds of chairs. But the older we get, I think it's like we have to do it well instead. We have to sit with skill rather than with muscles. So I think a lot of people come to Feldenkrais as they age because we have to get more efficient. It's like we've had habits since we were little. They haven't been great habits, but they served us well enough. It's like, a baby rolls over because he wants that toy, not because she wants to be really good at rolling over. We learn how to sit because we have to sit, but not because we're becoming experts in sitting. So wisdom is what we get when we age. So you're all using it by being in the class today. Anybody else want to say what's? Okay. Those are all things we can work on in the class. Now, the number one thing for all of those issues is our sit bones. So, and just another thought, Ian, if you're sitting in those pillows now, take them out because you don't, even if the monitor's a little bit high, it'll be better for you. You need to be sitting on a fairly hard surface with your knees wide and your feet flat on the floor. And if you have shoes on, this would be a great time to kick them off.
Yeah, I remove everything.
Okay. So the number one thing for keeping your back happy is your sit bones. So we're going to wake up our sit bones again. We're going to start every class with some aspect of this. So take your hand as if you were touching your back pocket on your pants, but on the outside of the pocket, and slide it underneath and find your sit bone. And wiggle around on it a little bit so that you can feel how wide is it? How much space is there from the front of it to the back of it? How far forward can you feel the front of it? And the front of it is flatter. See if you can feel the flat front part, and then as you go backwards, you go over a round part. So one of the secrets for having a neutral back, which is what makes your back comfortable when you're sitting, is if you're in the back, if you go back over the round part of the sit bone, feel how your lower back pushes backward a little bit. And then when you come forward, if you go way far forward on your sit bone, like you're trying to kiss your keyboard, then your back has to arch. And then if you go back over your sit bone, your back has to round. And it's that rounded position that ends up causing pain because our brain is, take your hand out for a minute. Our brain is really good at keeping us from falling. And so if your head begins to get forward, your brain goes, I better do something about this. And if the rounding is happening in your lower back muscles engage and stay engaged to keep you from falling forward. And if the rounding is happening right at the brow line, then those are the muscles that engage and stay engaged. And our brain, again, it gets used to patterns. It goes, she wants to keep me engaged so she doesn't fall on her nose. So it just stays that way even when you get up off the computer and you still have that little bit hunched position. So we want to find a way to get you supported so that you are able to keep a neutral back. So put your hand back under the same sit bone. And pull it back at 45 degrees. So you actually try and spread the sit bones a little bit and take it backward. And just notice there, close your eye, take your hand out, close your eyes, and sense if your back feels different shaped left and right. If you feel a little taller on one side of yourself than the other. And even if one foot feels more solid on the ground. And sometimes I'll ask these questions and you'll go, no, or no clue, or definitely, and that's fine. The process of asking the questions is improving the communication between your brain and your body. And it's like, in order to stay comfortable, there has to be a little tendril of yourself that is watching your own body. And it's just like there's always a tendril of yourself that's noticing when you're hungry and when you have to pee. It's not a major effort to do, but you have to pay attention. And let's do the other sit bone. Reach under. And then find on this side, find where the flat part is. Tilt yourself forward to find that. And then feel just right where the beginning of the edge of the curl is. And then let yourself come back onto the rounded part and feel how your back changes shape. And sometimes you can feel the sensation when you go back onto the rounded part. You might feel something just a little smaller collapse a little bit in here. You might feel the fabric in the back of yourself stretch. Like if you were wearing a skin shirt, you'd feel a stretch in the back and a collapse pulling together in the front. And then come a little forward so you're more toward the flat and pull it out 45 degrees and sit it under you. And just feel how your back is supported when you have that wide base. And it also brings your face a little closer to the screen. And so you don't have to do the hunch and the squint to look, but you actually come a little bit closer. It gives your students a little more sense of your presence if you're teaching. Like if I teach from back here, it's kind of like I feel distant from you. I feel like, oh, there's these little dots in the computer. Whereas when I teach from that front of my sit bones, it's like I see you more. I just feel more engaged. So it has a nice, one of the exhausting things about teaching on Zoom is the forcing yourself to engage with your students, right? Because it's just harder than when they're living, breathing people in your space. And the sit bone thing helps with that as well. Okay, so now just begin the process of rolling your sit bones under you so that it begins to slouch you. And you can do that with your sit bones grabbing the chair and they kind of tuck under you, which tilts your pelvis backwards. Okay, and close your eyes as you do this, because it'll increase the sensations in your body. And notice the first moment when your belly begins to pull in a little bit, where your abdomen constricts. Really how immediate it is. There's kind of a clenching of the bottom muscles as you go under. And notice, does your left side or your right side lead the way? Like, is there some way that your left sit bone or your right sit bone is better at doing this? And it might go first, or it might curl a little more than the other side. Okay. And once you decide which side is a little faster, a little smarter at tucking under, lead deliberately with that side. So tuck under with that side a little bit. And feel, does your weight shift a little when you lead with that side? Do you put more weight on one sit bone than the other? Is there a little difference in sensation in the back of your neck? And come back to neutral, and then lead with the other side deliberately. And it might feel like it is going to take a little more work with this side to lead with it, because this side isn't as used to engaging. And go back to the easier side and try it again, looking at the path that the sit bone takes. Is it straight forward and back, or a little curve in or a little curve out? And then go back to the other side and see, is there a little curve in or a little curve out? You might find the path they take are very different. And if so, see if you can adjust the second side path to be more similar to the first side. Okay, and rest for a moment. So one of the things about sitting in this position where your sit bones are wide behind you, it probably takes some pressure off the tailbone. And Pilar, I'm wondering, is this position a little more comfortable on your tailbone when you're tilted a little bit more forward like this?
It is, because I'm not sitting on my tailbone.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So the tailbone is this little vestigial pointy thing left over from having a tail. And it's not meant to sit on. And so it hurts when you sit on it because it's a little pointy thing. And if you sit on a pointy thing, it hurts. So the biggest thing for getting your tailbone comfortable is learning how to sit in this wide butt position and on the front of the sit bones. And then, I mean, if it's sore because you've been doing it, sitting on it a lot, it's inflamed, and it'll take a little while for the inflammation perhaps to go down. But if you stop irritating it, our bodies are really good at healing things. So
But the thing is that when we've been doing this exercise, I can feel clearly one of my sit bones, but the other one, I can't feel it at all.
Anybody else have a sense of like one sit bone is a lot clearer than the other? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that it's common, and it's one of the things that causes us trouble, because our body has to get equal support. The physics of it, the support has to come up through us and hit our spine and support our head evenly. And if one side isn't mapped in your brain very well, then that side will collapse a little, and you end up having problems on one side of your body or another. I noticed when I started teaching on Zoom, I hadn't looked at myself that often. And I always take my right side and go back with it. And I have a herniated disc there from 30 years ago. And I can make my herniated disc radiate pain down my leg by letting my right sit bone lead the way. I've had to learn how to get my left sit bone to be part of me. So which side is your harder side, Pilar?
The left.
The left, okay. So if you put your hand under the left sit bone, since our hands have so much innervation in them, that when we connect a hand to a body part that's not so aware, it helps the brain map the sit bone. So on the left side, spending some time now, but also spending some time outside of here, just feeling the shape of that sit bone. And then this letting the other side lead the way and feeling exactly the angle it's going, and then trying to copy it with that side. Sometimes when you, let's now alternate. Once one sit bone leads the way to round, and once the other sit bone leads the way. Oh, whoops, whoops, whoops. Hi, Kathleen and Nancy, sorry. I get so busy teaching, I forget to look at the participant list.
No worries. Sorry I'm late.
So what we're doing is playing with our two sit bones under us and alternating, leading one of them, grabbing the chair and pulling it backwards, or sort of rounding the back by one leading, and then the other one pulling under and leading. That make sense?
So pulling ourselves backward in the chair, one sit
Not
bone.
not really pulling your sit bones forward underneath you. Like if you had a tail and there was a string on your tail, you'd be pulling it between your legs and up.
Okay.
But alternating, leading one sit bone and then the other. And seeing if the path is the same, if your movements are symmetric, and if they're not, choosing the side that feels stronger and better doing it, and letting it teach the other side.
Quite understand that.
So let's try now seeing if you can do them at exactly the same moment, like to the millisecond, that both of them grab the chair, tuck under you, which pulls your belly in and makes you look down a little bit. And I know I still feel a stutter when I do it. It's like I go one and then the other. And so for me, I have to do even more of doing that second side first. And it's interesting. Most of us have some scoliosis in our back, some extra sideways wiggle. And you know, the first time you hear, oh, from your doctor or chiropractor, you have scoliosis, there's like this, oh my gosh, I have something major. And it's like, no, know that everybody has scoliosis of some sort or another, but we can manage our scoliosis. One of the practitioners I know says, the way she describes it is, I'm scoliosing myself. And it's this difference in how your sit bones give you support when sitting that is what is going to cause those curves in the back. And dealing with these now and beginning to learn how to even yourself out will save you a lot of trouble when you get really old. If you go into an assisted living facility, you'll see people who are like this and really collapsed on one side. And it's, if you get too out of whack, as soon as the head gets a little off center, it gets heavy and that process continues. So we really want to keep the head in the middle. All right, rest for a moment. Rest and see what you did when you rested. Did you go back and slump, lean against the chair? Yeah, we have habits. We have to remind ourselves sometimes. And sometimes what I do, if I'm going to be working all day in the chair, is I'll pad the space between the back of my chair and my back with some pillows so that it reminds me to stay forward and doesn't let me roll backwards. But the challenge is if you have something on the back that's soft and comfy, what we tend to do is push back into it. And so if you push back in and you push back in by rounding, that's going to exhaust these muscles. So you want that neutral back. So let's play with some more ways to know when you're in that neutral back versus a rounded, caved in kind of way or an overly arched kind of way. So put your one hand on your chest and one hand on your low belly, right above your pubic bone. And take a breath in and let it out. And sense which leads the way, your chest or your belly. And often there's a little bit of a 1-2 pattern where one will begin to expand and then only at the end of the breath does the other. So let's try something. Let's take a breath in and hold it. And then move it between your belly and your chest. So while it's held, I think of this as my hands are a seesaw. Like if I was lying on my back, my hands, one goes forward more than the other. And when one pulls into my body, the other pushes away. And then, of course, when you need to take another breath, take another breath and move the air between your breast, your chest and your belly. So it'll look like a big breath in, hold, and then 5 or 6 movements on one breath. Okay. Reverse your hands and do the same thing. And take a breath in and notice where the air goes now. So exhale, wait a moment. And then just when you feel like you have to inhale, inhale. And feel what parts of you expand. Do you feel it more in the front of your body or in the back of your body? We're going to do some variations on this now. So if you have a table in front of you that you can put your arms on and your face down on your table, or else push yourself away from your desk and you can lean on your arms on your knees. But something where you're folded over forward a little bit, where the front of you is compressed. Okay. And in this position, take a breath in and see if you can feel a little bit more movement in your lower back when you breathe in this position. And then take a breath in, hold it, and move it between your belly and your chest. And when you're bent over like this, you start to feel a lot more motion in the back of yourself, in your upper back, in your lower back. It kind of is a seesaw right around that middle line of your middle back. Okay. Now change how you're leaning on your desk or your leg. and just lean on one side. So you're tipped with one shoulder up and one shoulder down. You might find yourself looking a little bit to the side of your room. And in this position, hold your breath and move it between your belly and your chest. This is going to move the air to one side of your front of you and one side of the back of you. So your seesaw is a little lopsided. And then switch sides and do the same thing. And then come on up to sitting regularly. And find that flat spot on the front of your sit bones. Exhale, wait a moment, and then breathe in and see if there's a little bit more motion in your back. So our breath is an indicator of how we're sitting. Go ahead and roll back onto the round part of your sit bones and take a breath in and feel how the air only goes into the front of you. And then tip forward and find the place where the air can go in the back and the front, where the air acts like a shoehorn making you thicker in your middle. It's one of the indicators of are you supported, is if your air can go forward and back. And even in this position, you might be able to sense it going up and down, that when you breathe in, you feel a pressure down in the pelvic floor and a little sense that it lifts your shoulders a little. As if your whole abdomen had your whole torso had no organs in it. It was just all lung and you're expanding in every direction. All right, get up and walk around for a moment. We've been thinking and being intense for a bit. And stay standing for a moment. We're going to do just a little bit of the same exploration in standing. So once we're standing, just notice, where are your sit bones in standing? And you can reach your hand on the side of your thigh. There's a place where the bone comes near the surface, the greater trochanter. It's usually maybe 4 or 5 inches below your waist. And your sit bone is about that height. If you go from that spot where the bone comes near the skin on the side and go around to the back, you might be able to feel the sit bone under there. You kind of have to reach and push up into the squishy bits, into the round part of your bottom. And whether you can feel it or not in sitting, just know that they're in there, and try lifting one a little headward. So you kind of hike up your hip a little bit, like you were carrying the groceries on that side. You can do this sitting down if you want to, but standing up, it's a good break. And lift the other one. If you put your hands right on the top of your pelvis as you do that, you'll feel one hand goes up, the other hand goes up. It's kind of a little bit like marching in place. You lift your heel on one side and lift on the other. And get a sense, so there's a line of force. As you lift that hip, the force comes into your spine as you go onto your other leg. And then as you lift the other one, it goes across you. Do they cross at the same height, those two? And play with where they cross. You can make them cross low in your low back. You can make them cross high. You can make the line go right up to your shoulder. Just a little experimenting. And now just stand. And where's the weight in your feet? Is it more towards your heels or the front of your feet? It might be different left and right. Let's look just at the left foot. And the left foot, what percent of the weight's in the heel of your foot? What percent's in the front of your foot? And in the front of your foot, is it under your fourth toe? Or is the weight more toward your big toe? Or somewhere else? And then with your right foot, where's the weight? What percentage in your heel? What percentage in the front of your foot? And for a moment, stand up straight the way you might have been told to stand up straight as a child. Of put your shoulders back, imagine the book on your head, and feel where the weight in your feet goes. And take a breath in that position and feel, where does the air go in? And then soften your knees a little and lift your heels and then go wump with them. So you lift your heels and then just go wump down. Okay, and do that a few times just to figure out how a person does that, how you do that. And then try and do it lighter and faster. So it's just like a bump, 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 bump. And feel how in order to do this light and fast, your body ends up tipping forward just a little bit. And when you come down now, come down as if you want to be ready to go back up. So the weight in your heels is lighter and the weight's more in the front of your feet. And stay in that position and take a breath in and feel where the air goes. If you can feel it, your back expanding, your side expanding, the top and bottom expanding. So in standing, if you have to stand a lot, which is not really what this class is about, but that same idea that your breath is an indicator of whether you're standing well. That position of the shoulders back, everything back, is an artificial construct. It's not human. I don't know. Feldenkrais talked about posture as being ready for anything, being ready for a tiger to spring at you in any direction. And so come to this, to that back place where you're standing up straight with your shoulders back and your head. And imagine a tiger is springing at you from the side. What would you have to do in order to get out of the way? Okay. You have to kind of prepare before you take your step. And now come to that place, lift your heels and put them down. And now imagine the tiger's coming at you from one direction and see how it's just, you're a little bit more ready to move. You could try taking a step forward from that position or backward. It's the athletic ready position. And that's the standing place that's going to keep your body the happiest. So now come and sit down. And sit back nice and deep in your chair, on the back of your sit bones, into the back of the chair. And imagine that tiger is springing at you. It's like, darn, I guess it's going to have lunch. And now come to that front part of your sit bones. And imagine the tiger is springing at you. And it's like, oh, I can go up this way. I can go up that way. There's a readiness to move. And so that everybody has different canaries that they use to know what different sensations that they focus on to go, I'm sitting well. And one of them is, am I ready for anything? Am I ready if there's an earthquake to run? am I ready if my kid comes in with who's just hurt herself and I've got to go run and hug her? I mean, is it, whatever it is, that readiness keeps you in a place where you're comfortable. Okay. So I want to do a little bit more play with this upper back, because most of us have a little bit of that roundedness up here, which can get us in trouble in a lot of ways. So we're going to work with this for a moment by putting our hand on our cheek and begin to bring your elbow forward. And then after it's forward, you've got to bring it backward. So just as you bring it forward, what little movement changes do you feel in your body? Does your sternum move? Do your sit bones know that you're doing this? Rest your arm. Put it back again, little rest. And this time, and as you rotate it, see when it makes sense to push your chest forward and when it makes sense to pull your chest in. Okay? And stop for a moment. And let that arm hang long by your side. And rotate the thumb outward. And when you rotate the thumb outward, you'll feel your lower arm bones begin to turn. And then your upper arm bone begins to turn. And then after your upper arm bone turns, your shoulder blade begins to slide on your back and move toward your spine a little bit. And there's some movement possible just in the hand, or just in the elbow, or just in the ball and socket of the shoulder. But to go further, the shoulder blade has to go and the sternum has to turn a little bit. Put your hand back up here and turn a few times. And see, when does your shoulder blade come wide away from your spine? And when does your shoulder blade tuck closer to your spine? And do your eyes do something? When your hand goes one way, do you look down? And then do you look up the other way? Rest for a moment. And let's do an opposite move. So when your thumb comes down, that's the looking up way. So now when your thumb comes down, look down. And when your thumb goes back up, look up. It might not be so easy to coordinate. Okay. And then go back to doing it the way that makes more sense, which is when the thumb goes down, look up. And when the thumb goes up, look down. And rest for a moment. And just notice if that shoulder is beginning to relax a little bit. If you close your eyes and imagine a length of string between your ear lobe and your shoulder, is it longer on that side? And maybe one shoulder might be a little more forward than the other. Okay, so now put the hand back on your cheek and begin to slide your hand a little bit backwards, just so you could lightly brush toward the back of your neck. And you might find if you push your belly out as you do that, it's a little easier to reach. Like your knees are wide and your belly's big enough it could just spill on the floor in front of you. And right back here, imagine that there's a quiver of arrows, and you're going to pull an arrow out by its feathers and come across your face and release the arrow palm up across yourself. So it's reach the arrow, pull it up a little, it crosses your face, and you turn and look at it as you set it free to go. I have this image from we have blueberry bushes and we have bird netting on it. My husband, sometimes a bird goes under and he goes in and he catches the bird and then he lets it fly. So it's you're releasing this little bird to fly across. And so it starts with this arching to reach back there. And then as it comes in front, there's a way that your belly pulls in as you let it go. Let's try this in standing for a moment. Go ahead and stand up for a sec. And reach for your arrow. Just feel what that's like in standing. And then release it palm up across yourself. Just sensing your ribs. Sensing the weight shift on your feet. Do you coordinate your breathing with this motion? And is it easier to release the arrow with a little upwardness to it or throw it down to the floor? Try both just to see what those are like. And then just stand and feel for differences left and right. Which foot do you feel more secure on? Does one arm feel longer than the other? If you could only take one side of yourself into your day right now, is one side more pleasant to you? One thing I haven't mentioned today that I should, because for some of you this is your first time here, that if something doesn't feel good as I ask you to do it, don't do it. Or do it smaller or do it slower. But we want to stay in the realm of comfort because we're trying to practice the easy way of doing things. All right, let's try this a little bit on the other side with, so first put your hand there and bring your elbow forward. Just forward and backward. Feeling, and close your eyes as you do that so that you can sense all the little movements that your body makes. And how when your elbow goes backward, there's a little bit of this folding backward sensation in the body. Like if you were a bird and this was your wing, your body folds in the front when the elbow comes forward, and as the elbow goes back, the fold is in the backside. And rest for a moment. Put your hand back on your cheek. And begin now allowing this rotation of the hand. And the elbow moves, it might not move as far, but the rotation of the hand is part of what drives the elbow moving. So you could drive this with your fingers on your cheek, or you could drive it with your elbow moving, or you could drive it by your shoulder blade moving, and then let it go and rest. Hand to cheek. And just begin softly brushing your face just to come under your ear toward your hair there. And is it easier if your elbow goes a little more forward? Or if you keep your elbow back? And whichever feels more comfortable, go ahead and reach back for your arrow. It's interesting, isn't it, trying to sense what's comfortable? And spend the time in the looking for the comfort. The throwing the arrow, it's like, who cares if you throw this imaginary arrow? But getting good at feeling, is it nicer if my elbow goes this way or this way? That's an important skill in life. And so the arrow comes up a little and then across. And feel where you look in order to do that. Do you look down? Do you look up? Do your hips turn a little bit? Is there a way that the power could go on the arrow by turning and bringing one hip forward of the other? And does that make this whole movement a little more comfortable if the hips are part of it? Let's try an experiment. Hold your breath, clamp your body facing forward, and try and do this. Don't breathe. Don't move your torso. Kind of makes for a not very satisfying experience of throwing the arrow. Okay, and then try it letting everything move. So from your feet to your head are participating in this arrow. All right, and then just stand there. Notice if your shoulders have evened out some, if the length of your arms has evened out a little. And take a breath in. And feel, are you in the right place on your feet to feel the air go in the front and the back of you? And if not, do a little adjusting. I find if I just lift and tap my heels a time or two, that helps. And then come and sit down. Sit down and see what it feels like to look around yourself, if your eyes are a little softer. The cool thing about the body is that by paying attention to any area with this level of detail, resets the whole body into a calmness and into a, I don't know, to me it's a new place. It's a similar place that I get after meditating of sort of emotionally emptier than usual. And in that emotionally emptier, there's more room for possibility. And so this Feldenkrais work that we're doing in this class is a resetter on the emotional level as well as the physical. And just, wiggle your shoulders, wiggle your back around. How are you feeling? I don't know, we all have our own way of assessing how's my back doing right now. How does it feel like your head is on your body?
If you can turn your neck much more one way than the other.
Who's that who's speaking? Carol, you can turn your head much more one way than the other?
The right than the left.
So I notice when I look at you sitting that you have one shoulder up and one shoulder down as your default, and then it's easier for you to turn toward the lower shoulder. And so rotation, the part of our spine that allows us to rotate is, well, we have some rotation in all of it, but in the thoracic spine, the spine where your ribs attach, in order to rotate, because of the way the ribs attach to your spine, you have to be able to side bend. So if this side bend is difficult on both sides, then rotation is going to be hard. So let's work on that side bending a little. And side bending, so when we tip from side to side, we could tip this way, leaving our spine straight. And that doesn't serve you well for most things. For most things, there needs to be this little bit of sideways movement in the spine. One of the easiest ways to find it, how many of you have chairs with arms that you're sitting on? Okay. Pilar, do you have another chair in your house that doesn't have arms you could use for a moment? Maybe like a dining room chair? I think the answer you're saying is no. You're muted, so I can't hear you. Okay, so we're gonna do this differently. Pilar, get yourself a book.
How thick of a book do you want?
An inch or so. And I think everybody else was here yesterday when we did the book thing, right? Were you guys here yesterday when we did the book? We're going to do it a little differently today. We're going to do what I call the half-ass lesson, which is, Pilar, you're going to sit with the book under half your bottom. Everybody else who's in a chair that doesn't have arms is going to sit so half their bottom is hanging off the chair. So Pilar, come and sit up on the book. So the book's under half your bottom and you're up on that. And everybody else, you're sitting with half your bottom over open space. Okay. And begin to lower one hip. So Pilar, yours will come down to the chair. Everybody else's, it comes down into open space. To just lower it a little bit. And now put your hand on your head. So the hand that's over the airspace is on your head. And when your hip goes down, lift your elbow. And when your hip comes up, bring your elbow towards your hip. So your weight is either on the chair or the book. And you're lengthening one side of your body and shortening the other. And you can feel the ribs. The ribs on this lengthening side are getting longer. And
Explain, I think, so what side are you sitting on? Because I think I'm doing it backwards.
I'm sitting on this side. And so the side that's free is the side that I have the elbow.
Okay. I'm going to try doing the same thing because otherwise I'll...
So it's weird that this idea that your hip can lift toward the elbow. Come in and sit on the chair, rest for a minute. Take your book out for a moment. So in a way, what we've just been doing is lifting the other sit bone. So go ahead and lift the sit bone you were sitting on the book or the chair with. And imagine that on the chair, when you lift that sit bone, somebody put some money on your chair and you want to see, is it a 50? Is it 100? So you could grab your pants with your hand and kind of lift up a little bit and your head goes down to look at the chair underneath you. And you can feel the ribs really, your whole spine bending to the side. Okay, good. Rest for a moment.
Feet lifting, your foot is lifting, right?
Keep your feet on the ground. Yeah, you can keep your feet on the ground. You don't have to lift your foot to do this. So you have a little physical puzzle to solve of how can you leave your foot on the ground to lift the sit bone. If you keep your knees wide, that helps. And there's a sense that your torso comes away from your thigh. There's an opening. If you put one hand on your upper thigh and one hand on your belly, the hands come apart from each other a little bit when you lift your hip. And just sit for a moment now and notice, do you feel more secure on one sit bone than the other? Does like one side of you feel a little taller than the other?
Feels lighter.
Lighter, okay? And rotate and see which way is easier to rotate. Is it easier to rotate away from the side you were squeezing or toward the side you were squeezing?
Sure.
Okay. Let's go to the other side. So the kinder, gentler version of this is to lift up one side of your bottom and look for the money. So before you go to the half on, half off, just kind of look for the money under your bottom, and you have to pull your waist the other way in order to kind of begin to look under there. And then if you want to do the more extreme version, you put the one side on the book or one side hanging off the chair. Elbow on the free side is on the top of your head. And when you drop your hip, you go up with the elbow. Check and see if this is what you're really doing. When you drop the hip, the elbow goes up. And when the hip comes up, the elbow goes down. And then come off the book, come all the way on the chair, and rest for a moment. And see if that helped a little bit with the turning in the other direction. And then the other thing we played with in the first class for turning was, again, the sit bones. So let's imagine your two sit bones are like your two fists, and in the direction you're turning, pull that sit bone back and push the other forward. And you could play with this with punching. If you slide back from your screen a minute, put both hands, fingernails up in a little fist, and punch forward slowly, slow motion, gentle, with one side, and you'll find that that helps that sit bone know that it should go forward. And pull the other elbow back. Because anytime you're in a fight or punching, if you do this in an aerobics class or whatever, you want one side goes forward while the other goes backward. And that helps the sit bones do their thing. And then it becomes really easy to turn and see really all the way around yourself. So don't look at the screen as you're doing this, because as you're turning your body, your head and neck are all part of the same chain, and they need to go with you for now. And you can feel the sit bones moving in the chair, and that unlocks you. Pretty much anytime things are locked up in your upper body and not letting things happen, it's because your sit bones aren't, your pelvis isn't starting the motion. Our bodies are meant to move from the big muscles to the little muscles, and the big muscles are all around the bottom. So my number one strategy for sitting is have a live bottom, but that sense of the sit bones driving. If you want to lift something, lift one side of your bottom, and then that arm can go up. This is what we're going to play with in tomorrow's class, how to mouse from your pelvis, how to, but that, yeah, and lifting your arm, if you try lifting your arm out to the side and just feel, where does it get thick? Where does it like start to feel a little heavy? Okay. And now instead, when you do that motion, lift your other sit bone first. So lift your sit bone so the shoulder lifts, and then see that the arm can go higher. So I see some of you doing exactly the opposite. So slow down, let me say it again. That if I lift, how about, are you lifting your right arm, or let's everybody lift your right arm, okay? So lift your right arm and just see what it feels like to lift your right arm. Okay. Now lift your left sit bone as you lift your right arm. And when you lift your left sit bone, your left shoulder goes down. So I see some people's right shoulder going down. So everybody take your left shoulder down a few times just to, okay? So with that left shoulder down, lift your left sit bone a little bit. And then raise your right arm and see how much higher it goes. There's a little cap over the arm, part of your shoulder blade. And if you don't take that cap and aim it up a little bit, then you can't raise the arm. And the sit bone it's like one smooth motion of your pelvis grabbing the chair on the right side and cutting into the chair, and then the arm can swing up. Yeah. And it's the same thing going forward and backward with the arm, that if you push your belly out and arch your back, then the arm can come way up. And to bring your arm down, pull your belly in, and the arm comes down. Push your belly out, and the arm can go up. And your low back arches, pull your arm down, and the back rounds. Good. All right, rest for a moment. Let's stop the official part of the movement lessons and talk for a moment. I'd love to hear how this experience has been, what you're taking away from it, any questions.
It's great. I feel like things just kind of wake up and warm up and I don't know, twinkle.
Great. If this class does nothing but bring your twinkle back, that's a wonderful thing for the world, and for you and for the world.
I feel like I've had afterwards a little soreness in muscles, and I don't know if it's from this or just like things moving where they weren't used to.
Sometimes when people get started doing the Feldenkrais, they do it a little too enthusiastically, a little bit more like exercise rather than looking for the sensation. And the more you do it, the better you get skilled at sensing when it's easy and not moving past the easy. Most of us are really, really good at trying to do what's right. You see the teacher do, you try and do it just the same. And the right in here is more looking for easy and looking for sensation. It's a skill that builds, and sometimes you're using some unfamiliar muscles, some parts that are neglected in your brain, and those will talk to you a little bit. So just know that, like, for tomorrow, if you come to class, try and do things just a little gentler, a little softer, and then you'll be less stiff afterwards.
Yeah.
In
I
that
don't
way,
know
or
if
that,
it
not stiff, but
hurt anything, but just it's kind of like, oh, I wasn't used to doing that.
yeah, because we are changing your brain's map of yourself, and so new parts are going to be in the map and are going to have sensation that you're just not used to paying attention to. Kind of like Pilar said, like, I have a right sit bone, but a left sit bone? No, sorry, I don't have one. And yeah.
It felt like the air was really, for the first time, I sensed that the air was filling me up to the outer skin almost. It enlarged my inside, which was a weird feeling, but at the same time, it felt like, wow, it can go everywhere and I can sense it.
Yes,
So
the
that
combination
means
of it can go.
usually I don't breathe well,
Yeah.
It's not deeply, but it's not going everywhere.
I love the way you express that. It can go everywhere and I can sense it. Because the "and I can sense it" means that you'll be able to find that again. And it's what the brain needs in order to learn, is to be able to distinguish, oh, before I wasn't, now I am. Or, what did I do? Oh yeah, there was that flat part of my sit bones. And then it comes back. And one of the reasons we get so tired teaching all day on Zoom is that it's really easy to stop breathing. And it's, I don't know what it is about computers, but there's definitely something, especially like if something freezes, like, when somebody's screen freezes up for a moment in the Zoom, I stop breathing until they start talking again. And it's like, oh, I have to go. All right, take a breath. And
I just hope I'm going to remember things.
so the remembering is, there's really just a couple things to remember. you have sit bones, and what you do with your sit bones matters. And if you remember nothing else but to experiment and play with your sit bones, think of it as like somebody's just given you a new toy and you want to see what this new toy can do. That is the important thing. You don't need to remember a sequence of movements, or if you did that, say, throwing arrows every day, it would stop being useful to you after a day or two because your brain would know how to do it and it's not learning anything. And it's that what resets the body is the process of paying attention to any movement with attention. So you can, and with curiosity, with variation, it's the themes underneath that are the thing that will let you reclaim this. And I am going to, hopefully I have my proposal in for Faculty Commons to be teaching once a week classes. So if you like this, you like the way you feel afterwards, and you want to integrate it even more into yourself, doing it a little bit more helps. I think of your body's like a musical instrument, and one class you can pick out Happy Birthday on. And if you want to play Bach and have this smooth feeling body all the time, you need a little bit more time with it.
Erin, you said that you were gonna post these recordings on your OneDrive. How can we have access to your OneDrive?
If I put it on my OneDrive and I share it with you, you'll get an email that says Irene has shared this link with you. Click here.
Okay.
So you just have to be logged in with your BC email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know it's funny. I hadn't used OneDrive at BC before, but Tanya suggested I put it there to give it to her, and it's like, oh, this worked. That means I can use this to give it to everybody. We're reluctantly, the accidental techie is kind of how I feel like I've become with this process.
May I ask a personal question?
Yes.
So I've been using this to sit on to alleviate the pain on my tailbone.
Uh-huh.
Do you recommend I keep using it?
If you can find that position where you're at the front of your chair, your weight is on the front of your sit bone and your tailbone isn't touching anything, then I don't think you need that cushion. If that isn't giving you the relief, use the cushion the same way where you have it on the chair, but that cushion, the hole for the tailbone is pretty far back in the chair, and it's just not as good for our body to have our thighs pressing down on the chair. We want to sit on bone to have our skeleton supporting us, and the thighs, the middle of the thigh, there's a lot of, that's not a bony spot that's meant to be sat on. But I would use pain as the guide. You know, if your sit bone starts to hurt, and maybe as the afternoon goes on and you forget that you need to be forward or whatever, you go to the cushion. But variety is great for our bodies. So mix it up for keeping yourself comfortable. Yeah.
So what about then if I'm not at work and at Zoom and at the computer, but I'm sitting in an armchair reading, which I like to do, and those are all back kind of things, and my cat wants to sit on my lap.
So one of the things that I've, for other people who love to read in an armchair, is if you take either an old pillow and make a roller out of it, put a couple rubber bands so that it's roundish, and then that roundish you just put behind you on the chair, and it just opens your chest a little bit as you're reading. And you can still slouch, you can still be back on your sit bones, your feet can be up, but just having the chest this way instead of this way will make a difference in how you come out feeling after you've been in your reading mode for a long time.
So it can go up behind your head too, or does it need to be just?
Yep, it can go up behind your head too. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But I would use something soft. Sometimes people, do I have one up here? I don't have one up here. Like a 6-inch white foam roller. that's a little aggressive on your body to be curled around for hours reading. But that's why if you take a pillow and put some rubber bands on it, it's soft enough, but it still helps shape you.
Like a sleeping bag, and it's
Oh yes, a sleeping bag. I don't know. I have an old sleeping bag and it's meant to fold in half and then roll. I wouldn't fold it in half. I'd leave it at its full width and then roll it. Or a couple bath towels.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's that change in thinking to, and I love what you're doing is like, what can I do to keep myself comfortable doing the things that I love? Because we're not after trying to not do the things you love. And if reading in the chair with your cat on your lap is one of the true pleasures in life, let's find a way to do that that keeps you comfortable. Yeah. And that's the other thing of the not to forget. I guess there is another key piece, which is your comfort is based on what you're doing. And so if you want to stay comfortable, you might have to do something different. And it's the experimenting to find what that different is to keep you comfortable. Yeah. All right, it's a good place to leave things for today. Hopefully I'll see many of you tomorrow and in future classes. Thanks for coming and participating and playing. It's a lovely way to start the day.
Thank you, Irene.
All right, you're welcome.
So much. See
Bye.
ya.
Bye.